Welcome, everybody. This is International Stress Awareness Day 2017. I am your host, Danielle Sax. I'm a conscious self-care expert, a speaker, and author of the book, Shifting Out of Chronic Stress. But I am so honored to be the host of this event because I think there is no better time than today to speak up and speak out about stress. And my guest now here, sitting with me, is a very, very special man. And I think he's more than an expert on stress when you see all the things he's done. And I want to introduce you professionally to him. He is Professor Stephen Palmer. He's the president and the fellow of the ISMA International, which is the International Stress Management Association. And he has been a member since 1987. And he is a chartered scientist, psychologist, and chartered biologist with a special interest in well-being and stress. And he is the founder director of the Center for Stress Management, which I think has been going on for quite a while. And he's authored, as you can see behind him, he's authored so many books already and has received several awards. Now, I just want to say welcome to Professor Stephen Palmer. Hello, thank you for having me.
And thank you for contacting me about this interview. I'm glad to be here.
But it wouldn't be a stress summit without you, to be honest. You are such an expert in stress. I mean, you know, is there anything I could add to this introduction? Anything personal that you would like to add about yourself?
Well, I suppose I've been so immersed in it for a long time. In the Centre for Stress Management, which you did mention, we did set that up 30 years ago in 1987. So we've been heavily involved with this kind of work for a long time. Yes. And obviously I've authored and edited a number of books, as you can see there. And so many of them, they've all been associated in some way with the field of stress. So stress has been the main driver for me, but I've got involved with counselling, psychotherapy, coaching, training, consultancy, all different aspects to do with stress and different approaches, only because of my interest in how we can actually decrease stress at work and within families and individuals, and on top of that, how we can enhance well-being, and also in the workplace, in particular performance, of course.
Yeah, but that's why I wouldn't imagine this summit without you, because you know, I'm actually very interested, Professor Palmer, in knowing, because I've read that you actually did your thesis, your PhD thesis on stress, but I would actually like to know, what is your first link with stress? Was that professionally? Was that something that happened in your personal life? Where does your interest from we're talking long ago now, where's your interest from you know, coming from?
This is getting very personal here. I first got interested in kind of therapy issues when I was a child. So when I was about 8 or 9, I started doing self-hypnosis and hypnosis on one of my sisters. And so my interest in this kind of work has been around since I was a child. And I think that's probably a crucial thing. So I've been interested in human behavior and observing people for a very long time. And I suppose, so my kind of hobbies and interests as a child and as a teenager have just carried on and blossomed as an adult. And in fact, in reality, it's like one big giant hobby for me because I'm so immersed in it. It doesn't feel like work. It's just been a part of me for such a long time. Wow. Now, you've asked me about specifically stress, though, and that's another personal thing. You can do a degree in psychology and biology and not actually really focus on stress. And it was one Christmas Eve, and I was with my wife, and we were going to stay in a hotel. And I was getting impatient, as I normally used to get very impatient. And I was waiting for her. She was doing some shopping. It was at one of these shops it was in Tenterden, in fact. That's a place in southeast England. And I remember very clearly, I impatiently looked at the books in the library there, the books for sale and things. And I picked up this book. It's still up there on my shelf over there. I can see it over there now. I picked up this book, and it was about type A behavior. And I remember looking at this, reading through it, and I was quite bemused by it. I thought, this is a bit like me. How strange.
Wow.
And we went back to the hotel, and people knew Maggie and me in the bar. And I was just, just reading out bits from this book, and people were just laughing their heads off because, of course, it really was me. And I never understood as a young man, those pains in the chest, nothing to do with anxiety, just general frustration and anger, probably weren't very good for my health. And actually, it was extreme type A behavior I exhibited. I was off the end scale. And that's what really got me specifically interested in stress, because then I thought, my goodness, this is ridiculous. What can I do to help myself? And then from that, it moved on to how can I help other people as well? Because I then realized this is a very interesting area. I hadn't realized as a young man that how it was impacting upon my health. That was because I was excessively type A. I'm more of a managed type A now.
Yes.
It's to be more realistic. As you can
Thank
see,
you for sharing. Thank you for sharing those little personal stories, because it makes it, we understand you better when because to be your whole life in stress like that, and stress is such a topic today, but 30 years ago, it was not that kind of topic yet, or was it starting?
Well, when we set up the Centre for Stress Management in 1987, we thought, well, there'd be a lot of interest in stress in the workplace. Actually, we were wrong. There wasn't much interest in the stress in the workplace until the 1990s in the UK, when there were more legal cases. And that's probably the difference there. So as a centre, we ended up doing much more training of therapists and psychologists.
Yes.
We also trained managers as well, but often the manager would go back, or maybe the HR consultant or officer would go back to their organisation. And what the problem would be is that they weren't necessarily had sufficient position of power to do anything about stress. But what happened is that when they got into more of a powerful position to do something, then they did take stress management programs on board and do something very proactively. So that really happened in the 1990s. When organisations got much more interested in it. Up to that point, if they were interested, they went through the motions. That's what I say. So
Yes.
it was a different, but things have greatly changed now in the UK. There's a much more interest now, and with the help of the Health and Safety Executive, that's really helped to actually promote it. And in addition to that, they provided the tools and the questionnaires and devices to actually measure stress. So things have greatly ahead since we set up the Centre for Stress Management in 1987.
Yes, and also, when I hear you talk, because you talked there about the working environment, but when you talk about your stress as an 8-9-year-old child, those days there was less. I mean, now for children, we have one of our speakers in the event is specialized in, and she's actually a UK expert specialized in children, but if we talk today, with the life that you've had in the stress world, if you talk today about speak up and speak out about stress, what would be your personal message to the audience about stress, about speak up and speak out about stress?
Yeah, just to correct you, when I was referring to realizing I was quite stressed as a type A, that was as a young adult, not actually as a child.
Okay.
I do think this speak up and speak out about stress is so important. We've really got to raise the profile about stress and how we can enhance well-being and performance. I think the three go hand in hand. And on top of that, resilience is there too. People aren't necessarily aware of how much stress and pressure they're under. And I think if you actually look at the Health and Safety Executive surveys and results, there's certain things that trigger stress for many people in the workplace. One of them will be tight deadlines.
Yes.
Too much pressure, too much responsibility, the role uncertainty. Sometimes I'd say other things like harassment, bullying, and even violence in some workplaces. And organizational change, it's very difficult for organizations to institute changes, but it always seems to trigger a lot of stress. And of course, often the key thing is a lack of managerial support, or maybe support from your supervisor in the workplace. Peer support from your colleagues is very helpful. And it's very good to have that support from colleagues, but they can't always come up with the solutions, whereas your manager or supervisor may be able to. So when we talk about speak up and speak out about stress and do something about it. It's not just from us as individuals. We need to take it on board and maybe go back to our organisations and companies and communities, and also maybe within the family. And discuss these things and take it very seriously, the harm it can do. And you think about, I can always talk about UK statistics in particular, we always have so many people off work because of it. And when somebody's off work with stress, anxiety, and depression, the average is 24 days a year they're off work.
Yes.
But in fact, when you actually look at that, that's the average. When I see burnt out, stressed out clients, they may be off work for months, not just 24 days. So in fact, that is just an average. And I think we've got to see it that way. And also, when you actually attempt to total up the number of days lost, in the UK, for example, it's about 11.7 million at the last count, days per year. So we're talking about the lost productivity. And in fact, if you think about productivity in the UK, it's quite low productivity per employee compared to other nations within Europe. So continental Europe. So I think it's very important to see that. And when you actually look at the costs, the Health and Safety Executive estimate it's about 5.2 billion. Now, that's a very conservative estimate. I've seen estimates go much higher than that. And the OECD talk about some ridiculously high figure, about 70 billion or something. It's phenomenal, the costs. At the end of the day, people don't think about the costs. Actually, people think about themselves and their families and their friends. And that's closer at home. And seeing somebody stressed, when they come home with work-related stress, they don't come home in a relaxed, happy state. No, I'm looking at you now, and behind you there's a very nice, relaxing picture of the sea, and it looks wonderful. But they're not coming home to that tranquil environment. In their head, the work stress is still going on and on and on. It's very difficult to switch off and then relate to the family. Maybe you've got children as well, relate to them, and it's so difficult. And I think that's why it's important for us to speak up about stress and do something about it.
Yes, I'm very glad you talk that way, because in my experience, and I've been also almost 30 years in stress now, in my experience, there is nothing more important than taking responsibility for your own managing stress. It's the chronic stress, like you say, it's not really the stress, it's the chronic, it's the consistent exposure to stress that makes people, go into their burnout and things like that. Do you agree that, I agree that, like you say, our organizations need to do, to take measurements. But what about the person themselves? What about their conscious self-care, their accountability of, I talked with Johan Ilgenfritz from UK Health Radio, and he said, good health is a choice, which, being accountable. Do you have something to say about, instead of moving to organizations and something more personal, what the person, to our audience who is listening now, and they, what they can do about their stress? Is there something you have to say about that?
It's quite complex to discuss. So you've got the organizational stress, and it would really be very helpful if organizations dealt with it efficiently, but they don't. It's very difficult to help everybody in an organization realistically, but they can do their best. But the actual employee, or just a person, you don't have to be an employee to get stressed, just looking after your family. You may not even have a job, for example. That can be very stressful in itself, you see. But being the significant other, maybe looking after the family, it can be very stressful at times. So we have as you quite rightly say, we have choices, and good health and well-being is a choice to a certain level. There's some people in the UK, for example, that live in such disadvantaged areas, and their environment is not a very nice place either. Now, I talking to you at the moment, and behind you there's a very nice picture of the sea. It's very relaxing. But for some people, that environment doesn't exist. It can exist in their head if they actually do some image visualization. So that's why visualization imagery can be very relaxing for people if you actually look at the research. But they can be simple things. Some of the interventions to deal with stress can be quite complicated. But if you look at the research, if you look at what's called eco-psychology research, and we talk about green and blue exercise. They can be very simple things that actually enhance well-being and self-esteem. So, for example, we know walking in the country and maybe in the woods or out in fields and things, or just walking in a park, assuming you feel safe in that park, can enhance your well-being. But people don't realize they don't have to spend hours doing it. If you actually look at the research, you might only do it for 5 or 10 minutes, and 5 or 10 minutes in a nice environment, like being in the park or something like that, similar, can actually enhance your well-being and self-esteem very rapidly, and it's amazing. So we sometimes we talk about what's called the dose effect. So by all means, spend all day in the country or on the beach. It's very relaxing, but you don't have to spend all day. You don't get the massive return on spending all day. You can get a very good return on maybe 5 to 10 or 15 minutes, as opposed to a very long time. And when I'm talking to people and meeting people and working with people in organizations, so often they don't even get out at lunch times. And if they, in the UK, if they do have a lunch break, what do? They go online and do their banking, their shopping and things like that, as opposed to thinking it's time to get out for just get out of the office or out of the factory just for that 10 or 15-minute break. And I said it doesn't take long. And one of my colleagues, Professor Angela Clowen, one of her students, research students some years ago, they just did a very simple exercise in London. You know, what happens if you walk into an art gallery? And what a surprise, if you walk into an art gallery in your lunch break and look around an art gallery, guess what? Your stress cortisol levels go down.
Of course.
And they go down. And I was asked also by one of the TV programs to actually look at this, and I looked at blood pressure, and once again, what a surprise, your blood pressure goes down. So it's not rocket science. These interventions can be very simple. Now, obviously, I'm aware that there are very complex interventions as well, but at the individual level, it doesn't have to be too complicated. I don't think you need to obsessively do mindfulness training twice a day and things like this. It's whatever suits you, but it's getting it. You don't have to overdo it. You don't want it to become a means to like a new obsession. It doesn't need to take too long, your actual interventions. And in fact, if you've got a quite difficult, challenging life, you've got other things to do, like problem solve, get out there and sort things out. And you haven't got too much time for relaxation, meditation and things, but you can incorporate them into your daily life. But the other thing is that simple exercise, and it doesn't have to be overly complicated. So I'm not suggesting running around the block and spending half hour jogging and things. Just going for a walk helps people to switch off. And whether it's in the park or not, I think it's so important that when I'm working in London, some of the best parts of my day is walking to the office and walking back from the office, because just getting the exercise, actually fast walking, and with these on your mobile phone now, you've got all these tools to measure what you're doing, so you can actually see the speed you're walking at and things, and what's happening to your heart rate. It's amazing. Modern technology is amazing. So there's no excuse to not monitor what's going on and see how you can improve for yourself. And it's quite simple to improve things.
And if I love it, because these are basic tips that, people always think things are complicated, but the basic conscious self-care is very simple, and it's something that you can do every day. I totally agree. That's my practice. That's my life's work, to make it simple, to make it for people available. Now, if we go back to the theme and really, speak up and speak out about stress, what do you think is the effect of speaking up and speaking out about what is, bothering you? Is there a study or something there that you could say something about?
First of all, I think why people enjoy talking to their counsellor or coach is that it's cathartic. Just talking to another human being about your problems and issues is cathartic. You start to feel better just by talking to other people. One of the problems with talking to friends or family, sometimes they don't just listen to you, they want to join in the conversation. And I think that's what makes it different when I've seen a counsellor or maybe a stress consultant or maybe a coach. They're focusing totally on you. So if you're very stressed out, sometimes our friends and family are unable to help, or they say things like pull yourself together and things like that. And sometimes that may help sometimes, but for some people, when you're very stressed out, it's very difficult just to pull yourself together. Or
yes, and do I hear you say that you need that professionalism from a coach, a mentor, and a psychologist? You know, the fact that they have learned and how to listen to somebody, which is important, I think, in when you speak up and speak out about stress, that on the other side, somebody is listening, somebody is showing empathy. And so that, you know, I think that's, like you say, maybe your sister, your mother, your partner is too involved in your private life to take a distance and to really, is that what you mean?
Yeah, so for example, if you've got ongoing work stress, you come home and you share it with your partner. And the problem is that they can get fed up with it. And they start to find it tiresome, especially if they give you advice. What people normally do is give you advice and they don't necessarily pay attention. Your stressed out partner doesn't always pay attention to your advice, however well-meaning the advice is. And that is a problem for people.
Yes.
And what I'm saying is that if you look at, and you asked me a question about research. Now, if you actually look at the research into the field of coaching, many people go into coaching to perform better and achieve some kind of goals at work. Now, one of the amazing things about just coaching, that's when you're just, somebody's listening to you, maybe helping helping you to actually achieve your goals. One of the side products has been found of coaching has been that your stress levels tend to go down and your well-being goes up. Now, even if dealing with stress and improving your well-being wasn't on your goal list, it still happens as a kind of a side thing, happens in parallel. That's quite interesting. So obviously when you're attempting to focus on it in coaching as a goal, improve your well-being, obviously it's easier to see the change, but these things are happening in parallel. So that to me highlights how just talking to somebody about
I'm so happy you say that. Yes, I'm really happy you say that, because you know, people still think, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to be the host of this summit, of this team, because people still think that talking about it and expressing their stress and their, you know, their emotions and everything that's going on is weakness. Some people still think that it's a weakness. And I want to do just this summit to encourage people and say it's a strength. When you know, talk about what's going on, it's a, you know, it gives you, it's empowerment.
Yes, so just picking up on that point, I think what actually has helped this in recent years is that with social media, it means we have direct contact, often with very well-known people, whether they're models, actors, actresses, famous other people in other walks of life, and they're there and they're tweeting and using social media to discuss things, and they will share with us that they've had problems too. They've had mental health problems, and they're very open. And I think they've actually, in some ways, they've helped in an amazing way to legitimize sharing things. And of course, in the UK, we've had the princes coming out and actually being very open about how they felt as children and now as adults. And I don't see that as whinging or anything like that. I actually see it as very helpful, and it actually helps to actually really say to people, it's okay to be open about it. It's nothing wrong in sharing this. It shouldn't be seen as a weakness. Obviously, I agree with you, people still see it as a weakness, but at the same time, this is changing. I do think
it is changing.
It really is changing.
I totally agree. It is changing, and this summit is trying to change it. You know, that's what we're aiming for, and that's why we are so, you know, happy to have you as an expert. Now, Professor Palmer, I could talk to you all day, you know, but I want to have a very specific last question for you, you know, which is, if you had to say one sentence to the audience, one sentence that you want to say about stress, something, whether it's a quote or a sentence of wisdom of your, you know, experience of more than 30, 40 years in stress, what would the sentence be? I know it's not an easy one. Everybody says, it's a difficult one, but I'm gonna ask you anyway.
Well, I could say so many things here.
I know.
And I'm now sitting here thinking of all the different clients I've seen over the past 30+ plus years, and bearing that in mind, there's been common themes, you see. I know, for example, perfectionism, rigid perfections, has been a common theme amongst lots of stressed people I see. But if I was to think about, in a nutshell, if you want to have a takeaway from this,
a wise one.
It'd be a cognitive one. And so often when I see clients to begin with who are very stressed out, what they're saying is that in their mind, life is a real horror. What's happening is a real horror. And actually, when I help them to stand back from it, and it may seem like a horror temporarily, but actually what they're really talking about is a hassle. So often life, it's not a horror, it's actually a hassle. So we tend to awfulize when actually things are bad, but are they really awful? So that'd be the thing. Ask yourself, is this really awful, or is it just bad, or just a pain in the backside? What is it? So keeping the perspective.
Well, I think that's a very, very nice phrase to close, to end our interview. And so life isn't a horror. I mean, with everything that's been going on in this world in these last months, that's how we often think. But you say it isn't a horror, it's a hassle. So I'm going to end with that phrase. And I want to thank you personally for your time. I know what a busy man you are, Professor Palmer. Thank you very much for being here, and I loved talking to you. And thank you. We know that the replay, for some people who might have only seen a little bit of this video, who want to see the replay, they can do it on the website. The website is www.INSAD2017.com. So you can go there and see all the videos about speak up and speak out about stress. Thank you so much for your time, Professor Palmer.